Scrum refereeing. So I'll put you into groups because there will be a bit of interactive stuff and a bit of discussion amongst the groups. So first of all, to get everyone up and thinking, I'd just like you to all stand up. We're going to play a game. So make sure you're in a group and you've got a nice circle and you're looking at everybody. Alright. When Smudge called me up and said, can you do this presentation, I sort of wondered why he wanted me to do it. Was it because I was an ex-front rower myself, or was it because out of all the premier referees, possibly because I refereed in the Northern Hemisphere a bit where they take scrummaging quite seriously, but in all seriousness it was probably because I put my yellow card in late last week. So just to reiterate what Cody said, please get those reports in on time. Alright, so my goal today is for everybody to get at least something out of this. It could just be one thing, could be two things, could be three things. Okay? What I want is when you go into your game on Saturday, that you're feeling a bit more confident about how you're going to manage the scrums. Okay? What you're looking for, how you're going to deal with the players, and how you're going to deal with any issues that arise. Now, this is called Scrum refereeing. It is part two of a two-part series that's been issued by New Zealand Rugby. The first one is more about setup. I understand that will be done in your panel nights. Okay, so notwithstanding that, funnily enough, one of the first slides is Scrum setup, so we will be covering it, but at a very high level. I'm not going to get you up here and everyone has their turn at saying what their pre-match brief is, but this is a little bit more advanced than just Scrum setup. Okay, it's probably going to be targeted at B and C panel referees, but in preparing for this I know I definitely got something out of it, so I'm sure the other Premier guys will hear. The JRC, I appreciate that in some respects your scrums are just ball in, ball out safely, and that's a good result given the variations, but I'm sure there's going to be lots of things in here that you can work on to help getting that structure and set up right. So hopefully there's something for everyone in what is traditionally probably one of the more complex areas that we have to referee, and in years gone by it's also been one of the most dangerous for the players. Okay, so that even emphasises even more the need to get the right and take things pretty seriously when we come to scrums. And I was actually speaking to some guys earlier, and it's obviously one of the most criticised areas as well from referees, especially when you get to the higher level. Someone said a statistic that the players think that the professional referees get it right 80% of the time, which someone's shaking their head, they don't believe that they get it right 80% of the time. I thought that was a pretty good statistic actually, because I know how hard and how challenging it is. So the 5 objectives of the session, number 1, we'll go quickly through Scrum setup. Number 2, just touch on the law for a bit. With both of those topics, I'll just take them myself individually, but if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to speak up. It's important that we get some good discussion going. The next 3, understanding the importance of awareness, understanding the pictures, and understanding your go-to decisions. Now for these we'll break up into groups and I'll explain how that's going to work later, but as you see from the words there, it's not black and white refereeing as you would expect. Understanding the awareness, understanding pictures, your go-to decisions. Okay, they're quite interesting topics when you start thinking about them at scrum time. Alright, so straight into it. Set up recap. So obviously the first thing you do when you get to the game and you're thinking about scrums is your pre-match briefing with the players. Just to reiterate, the point is here to keep it short and to the point. It's taken me 10 years or so of refereeing to fully understand this, I think. I think as referees you get there and you expect the players to really want to hear what you've got to say. You've got all these good things about scrums and how you're going to manage them and what you're looking for, etc., etc., and you think it's valuable information, so the players should be listening and adhering to it. But in reality, I think they probably listen to very little. If you can hit home 1, 2, or even 3 points at the pre-match briefing, then I think that's a job well done. So just on that point, I think it's also for your pre-match brief that it evolves both as your career evolves and also as the game evolves. I know for me personally that throughout the years I've definitely changed what I've said pre-match. As the grades you referee get higher and more advanced, you can adjust some of that. But I think also some of the pressure points and some of the problem areas of scrums have changed over the years as well, as I've played around with the calls and the scrum engagement sequence and how they're refereed. So it's important that I think you have something in mind going into the game. You know when you arrive exactly what you're going to say, and you should adjust that, if not every season, then even more frequent. It's also good to reinforce those key messages at the first scrum. You can say something like, okay, ladies and gentlemen, as we discussed and agreed before the game, what I'm after is this, and just keep it. Could be gap, could be stability, could be keeping the gap on the bind call, okay? Just important to ensure that those front rowers are concentrating on what you talk to them about when it goes into that first scrum. I think the other key message there is when the reserves come on. I know personally you might have good scrums for 40, 50, 60 minutes, and then all of a sudden you've got basically two new front rows on, and you start having problems and you wonder why. I'm still doing the same things, but the reserves come on, they may not be as experienced, they're generally not as technically strong as the guys who started, so it's important then that you actually reset, and if you have to again reinforce those messages you spoke about pre-game, then that's a good opportunity to do so. Okay, so what we're talking about as the scrum is setting up is observing these four things: height, distance, stability and binds. And you'll cover these a bit more in your group later, about what exactly is it that you're looking for in terms of height. Generally it's head and shoulders above hips for those front row players. Distance, you obviously don't want them too close, so there's pre-engagement, but you don't want them too far away, which will cause balance and instability issues going through that. The next one, stability, again, interesting word, and we'll talk about that more later on about what it means to each of you and as a group. And the last thing generally is binds, making sure that they're on the back or the side, not on the arms. And as you're going through that, generally if it's not right, don't be afraid to stand them up and start again, especially with that first one. At the end of the day, you are trying to manage 16 players who are each have a dynamic of their own, so don't be scared on that first one to stand them up and start again. Okay, key law requirements. Can anyone tell me what law number the scrum is? Is it yes, no? It's law 19. It's previously changed, but if you read law 19, I was surprised to learn this myself, there's about 100 different sub-clauses in there, different aspects of the scrum that they actually focus on. So if you go into a game and you're managing a scrum and you've got 100 things at the back of your mind, that's incredibly difficult. And that's including the domestic safety law variations and potentially also the under 19 variations. So I think what they've tried to do here is distill 5 or 6 key law requirements, which you should have first and foremost in your mind as you're leading into the scrums. In the first one I was a bit surprised to see the law book actually does mention the words square, stationary and stable. I know we talk about it a lot as referees, but it's actually there written in the law book. So when you're talking to the players and you're managing through the game, those words square, stationary, stable, they're not a figment of the referee's imagination, they're actually written there in the law book. So I think it's quite an important one to be able to refer back to. Another key law is on the binding, both the tight head and loose head, basically binding on the back or the side of the opposition rather than the arm. And we'll see some clips later on where that isn't always the case. Another key halfback one is about the halfback positioning, which actually changed at the start of last year. So instead of lining themselves up on the centre line, they can actually sort of take half a step towards their side and line their left shoulder up on the centre line. Obviously the ball needs to then come in straight. Doesn't it lovely? Lovely was halfback in the game that I refereed at the weekend. So. The hooker must strike for the ball and the players must push straight. On the pushing straight one, the presentation doesn't reference it, but the law book actually says not only push straight, but you must push parallel to the ground. Okay, so we're not talking about perpendicular goal line to goal line, we're actually talking about having a straight back, not pushing up or down. So again, the key law references that are key messages to the players. Okay, so now quickly gone through that, we're going to break up into our groups. Okay, just as you are now. We'll walk around trying to make sure the conversation is flowing. The first thing that I want you to speak about in your groups is awareness. Okay, and what I mean by awareness is you've made the mark, you've awarded the scrum. Okay, what should you be aware of and thinking about as the players are coming and milling around and getting ready to form that scrum? Okay, two things in particular. What are the teams trying to achieve at that next scrum? And what are the key things we should be aware of as we set the scrum? Okay, so just give you a few minutes amongst your group. Remember the lucky winners of the competition are going to have to report back on the particular answers. So two teams, what do you think teams are trying to achieve? Own ball, secure possession from a stable platform, and opposition ball, disrupt the quality of opposition ball. So I might just pick on another group.
Yeah. Cool.
Screw gear. Who's the spokesperson?
Yeah, I am. Pretty much the same. We talked about right at the start, your hooker coming in and sort of setting from your mark.
Yep.
And also we talked about awareness of where we are on the field.
Yep.
And at school ball level, how to go about a dominant scrum. We talked a little bit about safety and management of that. Because Matt had an example of that on the weekend where one massive scrum, just demolishing the others.
It's very difficult, isn't it, in that situation, especially with the under-19s.
Yeah.
Okay, another group at the back there. Do you have anything else to add in particular?
Oh, probably not really. I mean, we sort of similar things to what you've mentioned. So depending on where you are on the field and what the time is in the game and how the flow of the game's been going, you really influence what the team's trying to achieve.
Yep.
Are they trying to achieve specific field position for dominance in Scrum? Or are they trying to just get the ball out quickly? And things we need to be aware of as we sort of set up the Scrum, sort of is being aware of those sort of variables and trying to be aware of what the teams may or may not be trying to achieve, so that we can sort of police that appropriately. So if they're 5 meters out and trying to maybe push over versus if they're front on the goal line, then midfield and halfway and could go right. So trying to position yourself on the field as well and anticipate what might happen.
I think that positioning one is a key message out of that as well. I think the reason why we're talking about these sort of things is the importance of having that awareness so that you're making relevant decisions. Okay, so you have a bit of context. You're not just seeing things as a scrum that's in isolation. You're sort of seeing the broader context to what teams are trying to do. So you're making relevant sort of rugby decisions that the players and the coaches, etc., can understand, because you're showing that you know the game. You're showing that you have that empathy, and importantly, given all we have to look at and think about, you're showing that you are actually looking at the correct things. You know if there's been a trend of the loose head boring in, that you're going to be focusing on that again. You know if a team's got a good attacking position, that they're going to want a nice stable scrum from which to operate a good backline move, and that any instability or disruption is probably going to be caused by the defensive team. So that's why we want to get talking about those sorts of topics, just so that you're making nice, good rugby decisions. So I think putting the answers up again, pretty much covered all of those. So that was excellent. All right. So again, we'll break out into our groups now. Ignore that heading. What the topic of the next topic is understanding the pictures. So break it down: the crouch, the bind, the set. At each of those 3 points in your call, what are you looking at as a referee? Okay, is that clear? Right, so break up into your groups again. The volume's starting to decrease a bit, so I'll take that as a sign you're pretty much done. So we'll go over the far side. If you want to stand up, thanks, and say, what are we looking for at the crouch?
So most of us are JRC, so first thing we're looking for is obviously same as everyone, straight, but then making sure we see the also the shoulders and that sort of stuff. You see a lot of guys sort of leaning or not that flexible or whatever, so not really holding your weight, so you might be looking for that as a signal as to who's going down.
So you're looking for the players to be nice and balanced?
Yeah, nice and balanced, yeah, that's the word. And yeah, I guess there's a lot in our grade, especially if you're used to playing the front row like our Crusaders, mate. You might have to coach them on just, getting their, technique right. So yeah, I guess you're just looking for them to be safe and straight and stable.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah?
Yep.
Fine.
No, anything to add to crouch?
We weren't that eloquent. We just put square, so shoulders and hips, space. It's your first opportunity to see if they've actually got that space right.
Yep.
Height, so shoulders above hips, and then that first chance to check stability. Because if they're not stable on crouch, they'll usually end up pre-engaged right away.
Cool. And what do you want to just elaborate on stability? Are you looking for absolute stillness, or is it something more than that, or something less than that?
I wouldn't say you're looking for absolute stillness, but you're looking for balance in the sense that they're equally balanced. So if there is movement, it's not one team totally overreaching the mark, and which is often usually not the front row's fault. It's usually the back row and the second row's fault because they're not holding the weight.
Yeah.
So just that sense of balance. So if there is a bit of movement, as long as it's not one-sided, you can probably potentially go on.
Yeah, I think that's again quite key, stability and that balance. So that you're waiting for that and you're not moving on in the sequence until you actually see that. It's easy to try and rush through the calls because you think through rushing you're going to get through it quicker and the scrum's going to be over quicker and the ball's going to be out quicker. But I think it's essential that you do demand that stability from all of the players before you move on in the sequence, rather than trying to rush through it because you think that's going to be the best outcome. Invariably, if you don't get stability and you try and rush on to the next one, you can guarantee the issues will snowball. They'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger until you've got an absolute mess on the set or when the ball comes in, and we'll see a good example of that later. So I think that was quite good. The answers from New Zealand Rugby, basically exactly what we talked about, so that's great. Alright, bind. So, on the bind, what are we looking for?
So what we talked about with the bind, we're looking for a nice long bind, not a short bind, to kind of enable that stability throughout. So if they've got a nice long bind, then it means that the scrum will remain stable, they keep their balance throughout the scrum, and it also enables there to be the gap between if there's no breakage.
And so is there any difference between tight heads and loose heads in that perspective? Is there anything that you're thinking differently about tight heads or loose heads, or are you treating them the same? You're saying that you want to see their shoulders, you want to see them square, and you want nice binds. Anything? No? No, that's fair. I was just asking. I think there is technically a little bit of difference in the law book around where the loose head binds compared to where the tight head binds. Under or over, it's a bit weird how the law book describes it, in my opinion. But anyway, you need to have those pictures so you know when the bind happens that they've got it right and that they're, again, think it's a good explanation. Nice long bind is quite essential to a good scrum, rather than the tight head dropping back onto the arm, or the loose head perhaps going a bit over the top, or dropping his elbow down. Okay. Again, I think that covers it all. So I think the key message there again is same balance, but in this situation no pre-engagement. So for those who've been refereeing for a few years, a couple of years ago there was a bit of a trend for the props to come, or the front rows to come together before we called set. Obviously that was a bit of a trial that didn't carry through, so it's essential now that we do maintain and enforce that bind, that gap, before we call set. So, what are we looking for on the set? We'll go to the group at the back. Expecting some good answers. You've got a biggest group.
Cool, so on the set, still looking for that stability right before the ball goes in. Unfortunately, I think we lose that structure when we can put the halfback, put the ball in right, because they at times can do that themselves. And then the other thing to look for is any changing of some of the stuff we spoke about before. So are they changing their binds from the initial bind? Are they moving onto the arm, or are they changing their grip to a short one? And if so, is it going down? It's a potential penalty there as a result of that. Are the props changing or moving their legs to potentially angle it or achieve something else there once the ball's set? Potentially on setting up, are they taking the weight, or are they trying to milk a penalty or pull back from anything there as well?
Yeah, you often hear that they didn't take the hit.
Yeah.
If one thing comes forward and pushes over the mark, it's sometimes teams are hitting and chasing, as you hear said. Obviously following up the set by a bit of an extra in order to get some sort of dominance before or just as the ball's coming in. And you hear the team say, well, they didn't take the hit, but actually I think it's quite hard for a team not to take a hit, and quite dangerous for that team as well. So I think be quite strict on teams, what we call hitting and chasing through. So again, it's the same things, and look, if you take it back to that law requirement that I referred to at the start, it's all about being stationary, stable and square, along with some other messages around balance and maintaining that appropriate gap. I think if you focus down on those sort of 3 or 4 things, I think that's quite key to getting good outcomes at scrum time. Okay, next topic, key pictures and your go-to decisions. Again, this isn't the easiest one to talk about, but again, we'll split up into your groups. There's 5 situations here that they've described. So again, I want you to break up into your groups, talk about these 5 situations, and what in particular I'm looking for are 3. Excuse me. All right, well, thanks very much. There's some excellent discussion going on there, so we'll quickly try and wrap this up. So I think this group here, right done, good stuff. So
if we talk about, say the top one, not stable,
yep.
That's like it's a quick decision. We thought the same with prop angle and illegal wheeling, so I'll just go through those quite quickly.
Yep.
Not stable early push. If you're waiting on your set call, then that's another lever you've got to save yourself a free kick. Obviously, if you get beaten, you need to act on that and set that standard. The prop angle, if you're feeding on this side and then the loose head on the far side is up and over, that's another easy penalty. It's not always the case, but could be. Illegal wheeling, we see that as an easy penalty if it's a fast wheel. Then regardless of the situation, it's just a penalty.
Yep. So on that fast wheel, what are you looking for there? How do you figure out if it's a fast wheel, or perhaps it's a dominant scrum trying to get some go forward and they've been pushed around by the other side?
I think it's the speed that it goes at. I mean, if you're positively sort of dominant and slowly creeping around, obviously you prefer they just went straight over. But if they're slowly creeping around, it's probably okay. you know, it depends on who on the field and, you know, who's the whole team, all that. But anyway, I think it's the speed. If it's just, you know, if one team and something's just boom, comes out of it. It's just a disruptive play.
I think that's a key learning. I think if it does spin on the mark, if you like, then invariably it's the defensive team who's trying to upset the attacking team. But if a team has managed to get, you know, all their front row over the mark in some form of dominance, and then it happens to screw, then it's probably the team going backwards that have caused that. So it's a good distinction there. Well done.
So we thought those three were the easy ones to answer.
Yeah.
I think tight head collapsing, loose head collapsing, we probably put it on right. But
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about things like, is it, you know, like a benefit of the doubt, legitimate slip, and so, you know, you see the feet go out and you see the mark in the grass and you just reset, through to, you know, just getting beaten and bailing out under pressure. I don't really have any specific examples, but that was the things we sort of talked about.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Thanks very much. I think we've done all groups now. Did anyone else have anything to add to any of that? We've got some clips here to finish
With
off.
the props,
Yep.
who broke the bind first? And who put their hand on the ground first? As to who's collapsed it.
So that's your towel. That's the picture you're looking for, as to who made contact with the ground first. As to who then slipped that bind first.
And who's got the curved back? Because it might be the dominant prop has got him and he's going down because the guy's back is bent. And he might actually go down first.
Yeah.
But the guy hasn't taken the pressure.
Well, invariably then it's head and shoulders, not above the hips.
Yeah.
So we'll see some good clips on that soon. But invariably, it's quite interesting that you noted that the collapsing scrum is probably one of the harder areas to try and understand who's in the right or the wrong. Some key tells there are if the tight head is twisted in on the ground and he's sort of landing on the point of his shoulder, then invariably he's probably caused that by boring in and not being pushing straight. Whereas if the tight head lands flat on the ground, just as you've said, but the loose head is sort of hinged at the hips still, then invariably the scrum's collapsed because he hasn't had his head and shoulders above his hips and been able to take the weight from the tight head. So they are some common sort of ways of understanding that picture once you see it happening in front of you. I think we've talked about the quick wheel, which was good. And invariably, if a team's getting dominance and has managed to push the other team back straight off the mark, and then it wheels or collapses, then obviously invariably it's the team that's going backwards, the weaker scrum, that has caused that, and that's where you'll see, you know, legal dominance rewarded. So there's some excellent discussions. Thanks very much for being part of it and contributing. We're just going to finish off with some clips. So I think there's 8 clips to go through. We'll just quickly run through them, but hopefully it sort of crystallises in your mind what you think you've been talking about as a group and what we have been talking about as a group, because I think there's some really good descriptions coming from you guys tonight that you'll actually see right here now. So we'll quickly